For a couple of years now, as I've worked on my Every Choice Geralt Would Make series, I've been slowly putting together a list of Witcher 3 choices that I think are just wildly out of character for our beloved Geralt of Rivia. Choices that he would never make considering his extensive set-in-stone past that we know so much about. These are all major decisions from side quests I haven't yet had the chance to cover, and because I was really in the mood to make a Witcher 3 video this week after a couple months of other content, that's what I did, so hope you like it, and
let's get this done.
First, we have a strangely controversial choice that, from Geralt's perspective, I don't think would be controversial at all. There wouldn't even be a thought that would go into what to do with this situation, and I'm talking about the succubus you can make Geralt slaughter in Skellige. Now, something Witcher 3 manages to do extremely well 99.7% of the time is to write its choices in a way that, no matter what you do, it's at least sort of believable for Geralt's character. This video, like the first one I did on other choices almost 2 years ago, it was one of my first videos, is all about where that idea just doesn't hold up. And in a minute, we're gonna need Regis to help me explain why this one is especially out of character.
Indeed.
In case you don't remember, you meet the Skellige succubus when Geralt is trying to find a specific flower at the request of a cranky old alchemist.
I'd be a good student.
Doubtful. You can't even grasp the simple notion that I want you to leave.
Long story short, the flowers had already been picked, and Geralt then runs into a Skelliger who claims many young men had gone searching for the same type of flower in this same exact spot, only to return with no flower and with no memory of what happened during their search. One man in particular, Raymond, had never returned and was presumed dead. As it turns out, about 2 minutes later though, Raymond had gone missing not because he was gobbled up by a monster, but instead because he was, otherwise occupied.
Stop it, that tickles! Two can play this game, you horny goat woman.
Surprise, there is no monster, just a harmless succubus who'd let Raymond stay as the two of them got along, and she'd simply made the previous men who'd come looking for flowers forget where she lived because she didn't like them and wanted the flowers for herself as she decorates her cave with the ones she picks. Despite flower hoarding being her only real crime, you then have the option to kill this succubus, and if you choose to, Geralt's reasoning for doing so just makes no sense.
Met a lot of succubi on the path. None set out to hurt anyone, but they all killed eventually.
What Geralt says here is just not true. That we know of, previous to this encounter, Geralt had met 5 succubuses, or I think succubi is right, even though that sounds pretentious, but let's go with that. Anyway, 4 of the 5 had never killed anyone. In the books, no real spoiler here, but Geralt becomes aware of a succubus in Beauclair. The Duchess, Anna Henrietta, orders the succubus killed for no good reason, just because she's being a brat. The Duchess is, not the succubus. And as it ultimately turns out, the Beauclair succubus was completely harmless, and Regis and her even end up falling in love, although it might have been a one-way love.
Never mind that.
By the way, that particular succubus is still going strong with no incidents as of Blood and Wine, 8 years after the end of the books. It's unfortunately bugged, so you can't pick it up in-game, but there's a note in the files from the succubus to Palmerin, if you remember him, where the succubus heard Geralt is back, and she's obviously a little worried because Henrietta had ordered him to kill her in the past. The note also makes clear that her and Palmerin are still in a relationship all those years later. She calls him her dear Tubby Nubs, because for the record, in the books, Regis wasn't her one and only. Palmerin was also involved.
And how is it we passed from your account of the investigation to reminiscing about the succubus?
'Cause those were good times, and we were younger.
Anyway, for another example, in The Witcher 1, Geralt can take on a contract to scare off, not kill because he doesn't want to, scare off a succubus because a wife is jealous her husband had been, knocking hooves with one. That succubus had also killed 0 people, and in The Witcher 2, there's another succubus quest where all available clues point Geralt to coming to the conclusion that the succubus is completely innocent of the murder she's being accused of.
Disrobe and relax.
That's still not even all of them. In one of CDPR's official comics, one that came out right before The Witcher 3, Geralt becomes good friends with a succubus, and at the end of the comic, he even invites her on the path with him to be his partner for as long as she wants. The comics are weird sometimes, maybe I should make a video on them, but anyway, that we know of, the only succubus Geralt has ever met who definitely killed someone is the other Witcher 3 succubus, but even that one is a case of very likely with self-defense, and well, that choice is debatable, so I'm not putting it in this video. Either way, Geralt claiming that every succubus he's ever met has eventually killed as a justification to cut this one down is not only flat out wrong, but that's also just not how Geralt operates. For one, he doesn't kill sentient beings that mean no harm, and two, what is this, fucking Minority Report? Geralt's now butchering innocent creatures because they might do something in the future? Guess he better go back to Velen and chop Johnny in half in case he talks someone to death, and while he's at it, he better swing by Novigrad and throw Sarah in a wood chipper just in case she gets any violent ideas. This particular succubus choice is so stupid, it makes no sense, and the every succubus kills thing isn't even consistent to The Witcher 3 itself, which outright says in its bestiary, the guidebook for witchering, that succubi are harmless, that they feel no desire to kill and mean no harm whatsoever, and also that they only ever become violent if attacked themselves. If you choose to kill the Skellige succubus, I'm of the opinion that you deserve the guilt trip Raymond lays down.
You're murderers! Go to hell!
For our next Geralt would never, we have one of the first choices you'll ever have to make in The Witcher 3, and I'm talking about the John Verdun situation. John, of course, being one of the most iconic Witcher characters, I think most would agree he'd top any best of list. If you do need a reminder of who this guy is though, John is one of the first NPCs you'll run into after leaving White Orchard and arriving in Velen. Geralt finds this guy tied up on the roadside about to be gobbled up by a couple of drowners, and then has to decide his fate.
Come on, quick, unbind me!
Before we get to the fate of this Witcher 3 icon though, and speaking of gobbling things up, I do need to take a quick second to thank today's sponsor, Factor, which is the meal delivery service. It's just the best one. That's not a talking point they sent me. I've just been personally ordering Factor of my own accord almost every week for the past 5 or 6 months because doing so has solved every single food problem I've ever had. Factor meals are fresh and never frozen, but by far what has been most important to me is that every meal I've had has somehow been healthy, convenient, and really good, which I had thought was an impossible combination pre-Factor. Factor delivers the meals to your front door each week, and when hungry, just pop them in the microwave for 2 minutes, or if you're like me, throw them in the oven for 8, and you're good to go. You have around 35 options to choose from each week, many of which clock in around 500 or fewer calories, and your order is fully customizable. To get started, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code NEON50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Plus, as an added bonus, you'll also get free wellness shots for life, which are a new thing I haven't yet tried, but you'll get 2 free wellness shots in addition to your meals for every order while you stay subscribed. That said, just know that you won't be locked in or committed for anything more past that first box, so I'm just personally recommending give that first heavily discounted box a try and you won't be disappointed. So after saving John from the drowners, he tells Geralt that he's a Temerian deserter, that he abandoned his army just before their final stand, and when the ever-so-patriotic group of refugees he was traveling with found out, he claims they tied him up and left him for dead. For reference, the Temerian army attempted, they only lasted 3 days, but they attempted to stop the Nilfgaard invasion that begins at the very end of Witcher 2, whereas other countries like Lyria and Rivia, they didn't even try to stop Nilfgaard because they were hopelessly outmatched. John clearly felt similarly about the Temerian army's chances, so he ran. And let's get one thing straight here. Geralt couldn't possibly be less patriotic of a character. He does not give a single shit about kings and their armies and their wars.
This is a really stupid war, Triss.
He only worked for Foltest because he was being paid handsomely. And let's not forget that, in the books, Geralt is a deserter himself. In fact, if I remember right, he even gets confronted about exactly that during Blood and Wine.
Your knighthood came through the grace of my mother, Meve, Queen of Lyria and Rivia, whom you treacherously deserted mere days later.
The point is, what you have here from Geralt's perspective is a choice where you either leave a human being to be ripped apart by monsters, the very thing Geralt is sworn to protect humans against, or to untie him and move along, as Geralt has a lot on his plate at this point in the story. In my opinion, unverified story or not, meaning John's tale as to how he got tied up, there is just no world where Geralt leaves John to die here. Geralt wouldn't leave anyone to that fate, and the reason I love this little quest is because both you and Geralt are once again punished for doing what seemed like the right thing in the moment. As you later find out at a camp near Novigrad, John sought revenge. He went and killed every last refugee he was traveling with, and standing amidst the bodies, the question still remains as to whether John's deserter left for dead story was even true to begin with. That right there is a Geralt choice and consequence straight out of the books, and I just love that. But as Geralt himself says,
sometimes virtue wins, sometimes villainy gets the upper hand. Still worth being good.
So, as you all probably know, The Witcher 3 has well over 100 little 20, 30-second events that you'll stumble upon from time to time. A lot of those have choices, but usually the choices involved are pretty uninteresting. A group of bandits has seized a bridge, pay up or fight, some drunks want drinking money, give it to them, axiom, or just tell them to
Fuck off.
that sort of thing. Of those 100 or so event choices though, there are two that have always really stuck out to me. The first is, of course, the extremely hot elf of Velen, or the charred elf of Velen, depending on how hot you let her get. A little northeast of Crow's Perch, you can come across a group of bandits guarding a burning home that clearly has someone still inside begging for their life. When Geralt intervenes, he's told to either take a hike or they'll fry him alongside the elf they're burning, and I mean, come on. We're talking about a guy here, Geralt, who, and skip forward 20 seconds if you don't want to hear a book spoiler that the games do spoil a million times already, but we're talking about a man here who died defending non-humans, a man who laid his life down because he couldn't help doing what was right against far more intimidating odds than what we have here. These bandits are slow cooking an elf for fun, and you're telling me Geralt's just gonna keep on walking? Hell no. I mean, even looking at Witcher 3 specifically, books aside, that Killing Monsters trailer, the one where Vesemir and Geralt are riding past a group of men about to kill some peasant woman, and Geralt can't help himself but to intervene even when Vesemir tells him to just stay out of it because it's none of their business, that trailer exists to show you who Geralt is. He can't help himself. He's not like other like other Witchers, and you know damn well Vesemir would tell him to keep riding past this situation with the elf too, but that's just not Geralt, and the same applies to this next decision. If your choices as Geralt lead to the Baron swinging from a tree, then if you return to Crow's Perch in the third act, in one corner of the lower village, you'll find a little follow-up event where the Baron's men have thrown a villager out of his home and currently have his daughter, who is also his wife, inside.
Your sons all! I said shut it!
I say his daughter is also his wife because the guy tells you outright that she's his daughter, but if you save her, you can see that she's really his wife, so take that however you want. It's definitely a bug, but whatever. Either way, Geralt would never walk away from a situation like this.
I can't let this happen. I won't.
Okay, finally we have a huge one, and this is future me. I wrote this part much later, but as I was wrapping up this video, I remembered a third little event that at first I wasn't gonna throw in here at the last minute because it's super similar to the previous, but well, you'll see why I decided to in 2 seconds. Just on the outskirts of Novigrad, you can find a couple of witch hunters about to take a mage and his wife to be burnt on a pyre in the town square. What does Geralt say right before he barges in?
Vesemir'd say stay out of it, but Vesemir's not here.
Yeah, that about sums it up. This doesn't count as the fifth choice, but obviously Geralt wouldn't leave these two and their son to die. So to get back to the real final choice, this one is from the quest Wild at Heart, which is one of, if not my favorite Witcher contract in the entire game, but it's also the one that I'd like to nominate as the quest with maybe the single worst possible Geralt moment in the entire trilogy, other than a certain choice during Reasons of State, because that can't ever be topped.
It's not my concern, so I should let you do what you will. But you're a real son of a bitch, you know that?
In case you don't remember, Wild at Heart is the quest in Velen, where a hunter, Velen, has a missing wife named Hannah, and Geralt heads into the forest to investigate her disappearance. What can happen next, though, is about as extreme as the Succubus situation in just not making sense. After traveling some distance, Geralt comes across a pack of wolves where Hannah was thought to have last been. But before he gets a chance to investigate, the woman's sister, Margaret, who he briefly met before, reveals herself to have followed him and offers to pay Geralt off if he'll just drop it, which she claims she only wants to happen because she's oh so concerned for Velen.
And, well, he'll not rest till he avenges his Hannah, even if it eats up his life. The man deserves better.
So let me explain why Geralt would never even consider this, not in a million years. 1. The children from the village just told Geralt approximately 5 minutes earlier that the day Hannah disappeared, they saw her go into the woods with another woman that they couldn't identify. Unless I missed a cutscene where Geralt hit his head really, really hard, he hasn't forgotten that in the past few hundred seconds. 2. It's established approximately 4 million times, both in the books and the games, that Geralt can tell when non-magic humans are lying. He can hear their heartbeat speed up, their breath become shallow, and it's part of his profession.
There's nothing behind me. I'm a Witcher, I'd have heard it. Just like I can hear your heart, which is pounding, like a liar's.
3. As you find out if you don't go with the Geralt is the worst Witcher of all time option, Hannah's body is rotting approximately 5 feet away, just behind the tree that Geralt is standing near. You don't need superhuman senses to smell that, and Geralt has those. 4. Actually, you know what? You get it at this point. Geralt would never go along with this. He would see the contract he took on through to the end. But I will say, if you do take the bribe and lie to Nealon, telling him his wife is definitely dead without even finding the body, then the cutscene, if you also choose to take his payment, is kind of horrible to watch.
Thank you. And take care. It gets easier.
Yeah, Geralt, enjoy those crowns, you fucking scumbag. I mean, in this scenario, Geralt not only misses that the husband is a werewolf who had no idea he'd accidentally killed his wife, but he also missed that the sister is the one who led the wife out to the hunting grounds to be eaten, so job well done, Geralt. Job well done. It's too bad the final choice of this quest doesn't really fit this video. There's definitely a debate to be had there at the very least, so maybe a topic for another day. Anyway, thank you for watching this 15 or so minute excuse for me to talk about my favorite game. If you enjoyed it, leaving a like really helps my videos get out there, and if you like what I'm doing here, feel free to subscribe. Thank you to my patrons, as always, for their support. Follow me on Twitter if you feel like doing so, and that's all. See ya.